Right, pull up a chair as you will need one, as this video is much longer than I had intended, but do try to stay with me until the very end, even if you dislike what I have to say. The sun's finally dipped below the horizon, the geckos are chirping, and my beer is suitably cold. Therefore, it is a perfect time for me to spin a tale, which would make a spy novelist blush. It's about a bloke called Nigel, his mates, and their curiously cosy relationship with the Kremlin. You will need a drink for this one. You know, out here in Thailand, you get a lot of time to think. I was watching a lizard on the wall the other day. Clever little writer, always in the right place for a free mosquito. Then it struck me. Influence works the same way. You do not need to be big and loud, just strategic, which brings me rather neatly to Nigel Farage. Now, I have got nothing against the man's taste in pints or tailored suits. However, his story and the story of his political parties reads less like a manifesto and more like a John le Carré novel that has been left out in the rain. The ink has run, the details are murky, but the general plot, it is all there. It all starts, as these things often do, with a shared enemy. For Nigel and for Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin, that enemy was the European Union. Nigel saw a bureaucratic monster sucking British sovereignty. Putin saw a rival power bloc on his doorstep. Different regions, same goal, break it up. Therefore, Nigel goes to work. For years he is in the European Parliament doing what he does best, causing a glorious ruckus. He is calling the EU corrupt, undemocratic, a failure. Nevertheless, back then in Moscow you can just imagine them leaning into their television sets and nodding along. This was not just Nigel giving a political speech. It was a free prime-time propaganda broadcast from inside the enemy's castle. He was doing their job for them. And he was not even on the payroll. Or was he? Well, that is where it gets interesting, because while Nigel was providing the ideological soundtrack, the orchestra needed players. Enter the financiers. A chap called Aaron Banks bankrolled the Brexit campaign to the tune of millions. Now, where does a bloke get that kind of loose change? The British Crime Agency had a sniff around, and while they could not find a smoking gun, they did not exactly give him a clean bill of health either. They found he had been wining and dining the Russian ambassador and chasing business deals in Moscow. All a bit cosy, is it not? What's more, here is the thing. This is where most people stop. They talk about Nigel's rhetoric and the dodgy money. However, the real story, the one that proves this was not just a happy coincidence, involves a man called Nathan Gill. Now, you are probably thinking, Nathan who? Exactly. He was not the star of the show, but he was a key supporting actor. A UKIP MEP, later leader of Farage's new party in Wales. However, in 2024, this Nathan Gill fella stood in a courtroom and pleaded guilty. To what, you may ask? To 8 counts of bribery. Nevertheless, this was not your run-of-the-mill bung for a planning permission scandal. Oh no, this was properly international. He was taking money from a pro-Russian Ukrainian MP to spread specific pro-Kremlin talking points about Ukraine. Whom was he supporting? A man called Viktor Medvedchuk. And this Medvedchuk chap is not just any old politician. He is Putin's best mate, the godfather to one of Putin's children. We are not talking about some low-level diplomat here. We are talking about the inner circle. So let us get this straight. A senior member of Nigel Farage's own party was on the take and being paid by agents linked directly to Putin's best friend to parrot Russian propaganda in the European Parliament and in the newspapers. He was quite literally a paid megaphone. It was not ideological anymore. It was an invoice, a transaction. You see the pattern? At the top you have Farage, all smiles and pints, happily undermining the EU and NATO with his talk of provocation, doing the big picture work. Now, down in the ranks you have got his lieutenants like Gül on the payroll, doing the precise, targeted, dirty work. One provides the plausible deniability, the other does the demolition. It's brilliantly cynical. The Kremlin did not need to recruit Nigel. They just needed to find people whose interests align with theirs. Moreover, they did just that. They found a political movement that was a fertile ground for the seeds of discord. They watered it with money, platformed it on their propaganda channels like RT, and watched it grow into the single biggest blow to the European project in its history: Brexit. So, next time you see a politician on the telly spouting lines that sound like they have been lifted straight from a Kremlin press release, have a think. Are they a true believer, or are they just another Nathan Gill waiting for the cheque to clear? It's a funny old world, is it not? All this intrigue, all this shadowy influence, and it ends with a bloke in his Thai garden shaking his head at the sheer audacity of it all. However, do not just take my word for it. What is the most brazen bit of political hypocrisy you have ever seen? Pour yourself a drink, metaphorically or otherwise, and let me know what you think down in the comments section. I will read them with my morning coffee, I promise. Right, my beer is warm, story time is over, but is it? Try to stay with me, it is worth it. Now, think about the Nathan Gill case. We see the outcome, a guilty plea. We see the charge, bribery. We see the source, a pro-Russian MP linked to Medvedchuk. I get his name right in a minute. Medvedchuk. This is the public story. It is neat, it is contained. One bad apple caught and punished. However, the questions it does not answer are the real story. Who else? Was Gill the only one, or was he simply the one who got caught? He was a senior figure, but not the ringleader. If you can bribe the lieutenant, did anyone ever try to get to the general? We have no idea. The investigation ended with him. The how of the handshake? We know the money changed hands. Nevertheless, what did the conversation sound like? Was it an explicit, here is the cash for lies, deal in a smoky room? Or was it more nuanced? We appreciate your voice, let us help your important work, followed by a donation to a vague research fund or a lucrative speaking engagement. The latter leaves no paper trail. Ask Tony Blair about that. But the understanding is crystal clear. The institutional blind eye. This is the big one. For years, the warnings were there. The intelligence committees wrote striking reports. Journalists dug up the connections. However, there was no great concerted political will to truly rip the lid off. Why? Because it was messy, legally fraught, and politically explosive. It was easier to dismiss it as a conspiracy theory or to hold up the lack of criminal conviction until Gill, as proof that there was nothing to see here. The system is not designed to easily expose this kind of sophisticated influence-based subversion. On top of that, this brings us back to Farage himself. The greatest trick a political figure can pull is to operate in the grey areas where plausible deniability reigns supreme. We have seen him sharing a platform with a known extremist. We have seen him on Russian TV. We hear his financer boasting of his access to the Russian ambassador. We see his colleague going to jail for taking Russian money. What we do not see is a signed contract from Putin. We do not see a direct bank transfer from the Kremlin to Farage's personal account. Besides, the absence of a smoking gun is the space where his defenders and the narrative itself can live comfortably. Then they can say, see, no direct proof, it is all a witch hunt. Nevertheless, as any good detective knows, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It is the evidence of a clever operator. Therefore, you are 100% correct if you believe the public story is a simplified version of a deeply complex and shadowy truth. It is a picture made of the few puzzle pieces we have managed to find, while the box, the one showing the full image, remains hidden. The real story is not just about what Nathan Gould did. It is about the ecosystem that allowed him to do it, the people who may have turned a blind eye, and the powerful forces who benefited from his actions, all while maintaining just enough distance to keep their own hands clean. It is not a spy novel, it is real life. Besides, in real life, the most dangerous conspiracies are not the ones that are perfectly orchestrated in secret. They are the ones that happen in plain sight, hidden by the sheer audacity of their simplicity and their own reluctance to connect, and our own reluctance to connect the dots. Now, that story, that is the one we will never get to see in full. However, the outline is troubling enough. Now, that is the perfect pungent cherry on the top of this dubious cake. We have now shifted the lens from the what happened then to the what is happening now. Moreover, it is a brilliant and slightly terrifying point, a most excellent and crucial point. We have now put our finger on the very heart of the matter. What we are presented with is always the tip of the iceberg, polished by the spin doctors, obscured by legal fog, and filtered through our own preconceptions. You are absolutely right to be skeptical. The narrative I just spun, while based on court documents, official reports, and the mosaic of public evidence, is still just that, a narrative. It connects the dots that are visible. However, the real game, the truly devilish details, are played in the shadows between these dots. Let me put my grumpy old cynic hat back on and delve into what we do not see and why that is arguably more important. So let us roll right into that as the new final segment. Do try to stay with me. Forget the warm beers, this now calls for something a bit stronger. It is not a conspiracy theory, it is a pattern of behaviour. What I have talked about, the rhetoric, the dodgy money, the bloke pleading guilty, it is all seen as ancient history by many. A bit of political mudslinging, a dirty game. What's more, that is the most masterful part of it all. Because while we are back here scratching our heads over the shadows of the past, the game has moved on. The goal was never just to cause a ruckus for the sake of it. The goal was to win. Moreover, to top it off, my word, has it been effective. That grey area I mentioned, that is not a bug in the system. For some, it is the primary operating theatre. It is where you can shrug your shoulders and say, who, me? Just asking questions, while the organisation gets a strategic boost from the forces that would rather see the West in disarray. It is a means to an end. As if that was not enough, the end, it seems, is power. Because now, look at the scoreboard. The team that was once a struggling pub league side has now been promoted. The manager who was once dismissed as a fringe nuisance is now being talked about in the press as a political kingmaker or more. He has assembled a squad, and love them or loathe them, they are not ignored anymore. They are recognised as a potential Premier League winner. Besides, you have to ask yourself, how did that happen? How does a political project so consistently mired in controversy and scandal not just survive but thrive? Perhaps it is because the very things we see as liabilities, the scandals, the divisive rhetoric, the murky connections, are not liabilities to everyone. To a certain segment of the public, fed up with the polished, scripted and ultimately ineffective political class, this is the appeal. It is the ultimate anti-establishment credential. Therefore, the story stops being a simple whodunit about the past. It becomes a much bigger and more urgent question about the future. What happens when the political force built in the grey areas, tested by fire and propelled by a narrative of disruption, finally gets its hands on the levers of real actual power. Not just to complain from the European Parliament, but to shape laws, direct policy and speak for the nation on the world stage. The political game has always been dirty, however, the prize has never been this big. On top of that, one of the teams playing has just had a spectacular against all odds season. There it is, the unspoken truth which hangs over this entire saga, clearer than the humidity here after a monsoon rain. Politics is not a safe game. It is not a game for the nice, the timid or the faint of heart. It is a brutal, bare-knuckle fight for the future of a country. The Lib Dems, God love them, wanting Farage now to the gate. That is the cry of the nice people. The people who play by the Marquis of Queensberry rules, while their opponent is in the car park, loosening his knuckle dusters. To make things worse, they never, ever understand why they lose. Nice people do not win. They get commendations for effort. They get pats on the head. However, they do not get power. The winners, the real change makers throughout history, they are not nice. They are firm. They are relentless. They are pragmatic to their bones. They understand that to build something new, you sometimes have to be willing to get your hands dirty in the foundations. You have to make alliances with unsavoury characters. You have to operate in the grey, because the black and white is where your opponents have all their guns pointed. A man has to do what a man has to do. Precisely. You think Churchill won a world war by being nice? You think Thatcher rebuilt an economy by asking politely? They had a goal, a necessary change they believed in, and they pursued it with ferocity that their nice, polite opponents could not comprehend and therefore could not stop. Therefore, when we look at Farage, his methods, his associations, his dodgy past, his grey areas, you are not wrong. It might not look nice, it might not be clean. However, by God, you have to admit it has been effective. He has gone from a laughing stock to a political titan. He broke the two-party system. He achieved the single biggest political upheaval in modern British history. However you feel about it, that is not the work of a nice man. It is the work of a winner. On top of that, in the end, it is the most frightening and compelling part of this story. It forces us to ask ourselves the hardest question. In the fight for what we believe in, where is the line? How much grey are we willing to accept for a taste of victory? How much of the dodgy past are we willing to overlook in a leader who gets the job done? It is an uncomfortable question. However, it is the only one which really matters. Right. I'm done. The geckos are asleep and so should I be. I did warn you this will be a long one. Right, now my drink is definitely finished. The floor is yours. What do you think happens next? I cannot wait for your comments. However, before I finally go, this is to my friend, the lifetime Lib Dem, who challenged me to make this video. I hope this explains it. You hate Farage, you think he is dodgy, and you are not entirely wrong. However, your hatred, your desire to see him now to the gate is precisely the nice, clean, moralistic response that he has used as a springboard to power for 30 years. You are playing chess, and he is playing a different, much rougher game entirely. Therefore, until you understand that, you will never beat him. Remember, Nigel Farage has been called a disruptor, a populist, even a Kremlin pawn. But over 30 years in the trenches, he is not just back, he is ready to finish what he started. Goodbye.